stream of GDPR Wise and Meet Ergo. My name is Dominic, and today Patrick is joining me from GDPR Wise. He's the co-founder, and he has a lot of knowledge in terms of GDPR, especially for SMEs. And yeah, let's jump into it, why it matters and how to comply. Pat, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Dominic. Thank you, Mitergo, for having us. And welcome to everyone on the stream. What we will focus on today is why GDPR is important to you as a small, medium-sized enterprise. What's the essence of this regulation, how to comply. And although there's a bit of theory to go through, we'll focus most on real-life examples. We'll bring it to life. Quick disclaimer. This is not an extensive overview of all the ins and outs of GDPR. No, these are the highlights. We've taken a quite pragmatic view focused on the small, medium-sized enterprise. Definitely not a substitute for legal advice. So here we go. A bit of context. European legislation, meaning it's introduced at European level uniformly, then to be implemented across all of the member states, in force since 2018, so a little while now, and mandatory for all organizations that serve the EU market. So that means European organizations, but equally some of the US, for example, or China and Chinese organizations. The moment you serve the EU market, you need to abide by these rules. It's irrespective of size. If you're a big firm or small firm, GDPR applies, even if you profit or non-profit. And so charities, associations, or your local tennis club, they all have to comply across any of the industries. Now, the regulation is introduced at the EU level, but the supervision, the checking, the policing is done at a national or even regional level, for example, in Germany. Okay, so there you go. So why is it important to you? In fact, because it is a legal obligation. So it might not be fun to have another requirement, but it's similar to you having to do your accounting. GDPR is mandatory, and there are fines. Now you might think government or the regulator is not going to come after me as a small firm. Do know that most of the charges come indirectly, and mostly when relationships break off. So a staff, an unhappy member of staff that leaves might just want to use GDPR to its advantage, or customer relationships break off, then those unhappy customers might want to use GDPR to get an advantage. Do know that as you grow, as you get more successful as a small, medium enterprise, large companies you deal with, that could be partners, that could be suppliers to you, that could be customers to you, will insist that you are compliant, because GDPR has a built-in chain element. So anyone in the chain is actually responsible for the totality. And customers care more and more about privacy. We're in a digital world. We have the AI revolution coming. So data is only more important, and proper use of data is super important to your customers. So there you go. So what's the essence of the regulation? There's two aspects. It's actually fairly straightforward. There's rules about personal data. And that's it, really. That's the headline. GDPR implies certain rules on personal data. And these boxes summarize the two aspects. And hopefully in the next 10 minutes or so, you'll know enough about each of those boxes to understand how that impacts you as an SME. So let's start with the personal data. So it already means that GDPR doesn't apply to all data. No, it applies to personal data. And personal data is data that's related to an identifiable natural person. So not all Belgian people, all Belgian males. No, it applies to me as an identifiable natural person, Patrick Dewals. But not just me acting as a customer, which gets most of the attention, but equally if I'm an employee or a supplier or a third party in any kind of transaction. So it's definitely about individuals, and then elements, data elements that describe those individuals. So name, address, date of birth, etc. But equally, it's data that is linked to individuals. So if my purchase history is linked to me as a person, as an individual, and as a result, it falls under the category of personal data. If I'm an employee and you have performance reviews, guess what? Those performance reviews fall under personal data. And then lastly, here on this slide, just to note that there is in GDPR a mention of special category data that are really sensitive and have different rules. We're not going to go into these rules, but for example, health-related data, biometric data, they have special provisions. If your company, your app, your firm would use some of those, you should really seek professional advice. So let's practice that. Imagine you have a loyalty card in store or kind of online, and it has name, postal code, purchase history. Hey, by now you understand these are personal data elements. If you would run a web shop and people buy online via the smartphone, and somehow you track or you're aware of the location, then you know what, that location data, even if you say, well, we don't really do anything with that, but you have it as part of the software package that you would choose, then that is all personal data. In the space of employees, if you have your work schedules, attendance register, sick days, all personal data because they link to that individual. Similarly, you have suppliers and you would record a contact name and some details about who to contact the supplier, again, personal data. Example, maybe for today here, you might have meeting software like Meetergo that you use, a SaaS tool. Then those data elements you use to schedule the meeting, name, email, and potentially any recordings of it, and elements that are shared, maybe files that are shared as part of the meeting, could all be considered as personal data. Okay, so in summary, it's about individuals and the data about individuals, but equally elements that can be linked to that individual. Do note, it's not just about the customer space, it's also about the other roles that individuals can undertake, and there's a special category data. So that's it, that's the right-hand side done. Surely that wasn't too hard. Let's now focus on those rules. Start with data minimization. GDPR has very specific rules to say, right, you only can use personal data that is linked to a specific and documented business purpose. So it can't be that you collect all sorts of data and say, well, I might use it today, I might use it in the near future or distant future, but I'll just, you know, gather whatever I can. No, that's not allowed by GDPR. GDPR says you need to have a business purpose that is nicely documented, and then within that purpose, you can use that data. So for instance, one purpose, of course, would be, or a business process would be to send invoices or do your accounting, and then you can request my billing details as part of that purpose, because you know what, you need to send invoices. So for each of the business activities that you have, you really should have those documented. And then within that business purpose, you should have sight of which data elements you use. And secondly, you should only use the data that is strictly necessary to achieve that purpose. So if you want to send a newsletter, which is a business purpose, then you don't need anything else really than an email or maybe the name to give kind of to address the person correctly. But you don't need any more. You don't need my address. You don't need my mobile phone number. You don't need my gender, any of these things. So if the business purpose is sending a newsletter, then you should only ever use for that purpose the data that's strictly necessary. And then thirdly, and this is I think the one aspect that's a bit legal in nature is that for any of those business purposes that you would document, GDPR only allows 4 very specific legal bases. So what's the foundation? What's the legal basis that would allow you to, in a compliant manner, process that data? 1 and 2, fairly obvious. Either we have a contractual relationship. For instance, I offer consulting services, and in order for me to offer that service, we have a contract. And so any of the processing of that data, in order for me to provide the consulting services, will go under that legal basis. So we have a contract. It could be SaaS tool. You have terms and conditions. I tick the box. You know what terms and conditions are a type of contract. And so as part of that contractual framework, the data is being used. Second option is legal obligation. The accounting example already gave. You need to send invoices. So you process my accounting information or my VAT number as part of the legal obligation. So 1 and 2 sound solid. It's a contract. The law requires you to do it. That's solid. And 3 and 4, that's where it gets a bit more fluffy. So if you don't have a contractual or a legal obligation, then you can ask also the use of a consent. So classical example is, of course, the cookies. You visit the website, or I visit the website, and by no means having a cookie is a contractual obligation nor a legal obligation. But you can if I consent to it. And that's why you need to ask for consent for any cookie that isn't really absolutely necessary. Consent as the third one. Last one is legitimate interest. So if as part of your commercial activities, this kind of adjacent activities that you think, hey, these really form part of my wholesome business activities, then that is allowed under the legal basis of legitimate interest. So, classical example, imagine you sell on a pet food and I'm a customer of yours. You know what, you send me at the end of the month saying, hey, Pat, there's a new deal, a 2-for-1 deal, and you'll pay less and get kind of a new variety that's even better for your dog. And so, hey, that's actually useful to me. It's a legitimate interest for you to increase your turnover. But mind you, I can always, as an individual, object to any of that processing. So if at some point I say, right, this is enough, don't want any of these things to happen anymore, then I can object to any processing where you use the legitimate interest as a legal basis. So this is a bit the most technical, legally technical aspect of GDPR, but do be aware that every purpose for your processing needs to have a legal basis. Yeah. So if we put that in practice, imagine 2 business processes that you would need to document. Example here, some sort of a reward for loyal customers that give you repeat business. That would be one process. Second process would be, for instance, scheduling meetings using the MeetErgo tool. Well, for which data is strictly necessary here, so your business purposes are documented, strictly necessary for the reward of loyal customers. Well, you need a name and address to identify the customer and the purchase history, so you know, hey, this is a second purchase, third purchase, or they go over a particular turnover or threshold. Nothing else. You don't need phone numbers. You don't need genders and birthdays. No, that's all you need. That's all you need to achieve that business process. Second one, for the meeting scheduling, well, a name and an address, email and address are all you need, really. And so other items are not allowed in the GDPR data minimization setup. Legal basis, twice a contract here. So a loyal customer, you have a contractual relationship with that customer. Similar for some SaaS tool, you would have T's and C's. Even if you want to try out the tool, you kind of have an intent that you would enter into a contract. Do raise any, if you would have any questions, do raise them, and Dominic will alert me of that. Just to summarize, data minimization, and mind you, this is not FYIs, these are actually actions that GDPR wants you to take. 1, So make that inventory of all those business activities that use personal data. Make sure you have the business purposes listed and the legal basis. Make sure you only use those data items that are strictly necessary. If you just happen to use some software that wasn't tailor-made for you, but you use certain packages, if too many data elements are in there, then ask if it can't be configured to limit them. You might want to ask your software vendor to remove those, so you don't risk overusing. Okay, so that's one. That's probably the main one. If you minimize data, then data can't be misused or even breached as part of a hack. You didn't have the data in the first place. So that's a very good principle to abide with. Second one is transparency. So as part of the minimization, you really have to document and reflect on what data you're using. And actually, you'll put that to good use here as part of the transparency rule, because GDPR said you need to communicate and educate those people you're using the personal data of. And so that's where the privacy policy comes in. Every firm, every organization should have a privacy policy, so it can inform its customers, for example, that they're using certain data elements for certain purposes. And so I, as a customer, can then be, prior to engaging with you guys, prior to selecting your business, I can be informed of how you process my data. But that again holds true for not just customers, for staff, for partners, etc., etc. You definitely want to inform those parties via appropriate privacy policies. Definitely want to raise awareness and educate anyone in your organization. GDPR also says that you should be clear and specific when informing. So you can't just have a privacy policy that says to deliver the services, we use data, for example, name, etc., etc. That's, you often see that on copy and paste efforts on privacy policy, but that is not allowed. You need to be very specific and clear. So for the accounting, I use certain things. For my newsletter, I use other things. For my meeting setup, I use other data elements. These are the purposes. These are the legal bases. It needs to be very specific. Again, note here, don't just look at the customers, but look at all roles individuals might have and where you use their personal data. One other element to note is that GDPR wants you to document and communicate the retention period. Again, similar along the lines of minimization, you can't really keep data till, well, you see fit, or the end of days, as long as it is necessary. That's when you can keep, that's how long you can keep the data. As an example, if you would have job interviews and you wouldn't retain a certain candidate, then you know what, maybe you want to keep the application for a little while because maybe you have another similar opening coming, but there's an end to that, because otherwise you don't minimize data, and again, it might get exposed or misused. So actions here, you have the obligation to provide transparency to all those involved. So externally, publicly, you want to put out a good privacy policy with the rules we just explained. Internally, you want to keep a register, and that's also a mandatory document of all those business activities that use personal data. When you use certain tools, SaaS especially, you're actually inadvertently sharing data. The data lives on the SaaS tool in the cloud, not within your own control. So it might be a good idea to have a data sharing agreement. And make sure that as part of your transparency efforts, you also educate and train those in the firm that deal with personal data. So that's it. Minimization, transparency. Then we need to talk a little bit about security. I'm not going to go into any depth here, but security and privacy go hand in hand. You can't really, if you have no security and your data can just be exposed or accessed by anyone, then of course you can't guarantee the privacy of the data of your customers. Security is a very broad topic. We're just highlighting a few elements here. there is such thing as the environment. So if your office building or cabinets that have certain file documents, if they're not locked, well, you know what, then these documents can be easily exposed. So that's not what you want. At the system and the software level, of course, you want to look at certain things. Is the environment correctly set up? They're not certain ports open that shouldn't be open. Do you use passwords? One element to note as well, that as part of security, GDPR not only calls out standard security practices, but also access control. It shouldn't be that every colleague has access to all the data. If I have a medical practice, then maybe as a practitioner, I should only have access to my dossiers, my patients. I shouldn't be having access to other dossiers. There's a topic around data security, where surely you've heard of encryption. You can encrypt the data in the database itself where it is stored, but equally when data would get transferred to a website or to partners, you want to make sure that there's encryption there as well. And then there's always the human factor, which is often the weakest link. We all got spam emails. You all get emails, phishing emails, they're called, with links that take you to a hacked website. So you want to make sure that you have your staff trained for these aspects.
So, Pat, maybe I have a question for this one. I heard that Airbus, for instance, they are storing all their data in the Google Cloud, which is, yeah, maybe not the best in terms of GDPR because it's a US company, but they encrypt all the data, and that's why they don't care about it, because they only have the key. What is your thought on this? And maybe is there a similar approach for SMEs?
It is a tricky area. So because the European side of things, GDPR has said, US isn't really the best country because they're so far-reaching and anti-terrorist laws, and actually government can have access to pretty much any data. There's backdoors into everything, and there's no guarantees that this is not the case because it's all fairly behind closed doors. And I'm sure you've heard of the Schrems guide that is challenging each time these arrangements. So the last has not been said. For now, the safest is to go with a European vendor. But of course, the alternatives are not always equal in capabilities and pricing. But as you said, if everything is nicely encrypted, although it's a US organization, if it is on guaranteed EU data centers, and you're probably already better off. But if there are European alternatives, it's safer to go for the European alternatives.
Yeah, I mean, I heard that Max Schrems is also going after this new Privacy Shield 2.0 as well. So yeah, let's see how long it will exist.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So in security, some practical actions here. Make sure that your staff and anyone involved in personal data goes through at least an annual GDPR security privacy awareness training. Practical tips: if you have software and computers and all sorts, make sure that there's good passwords, strong passwords on there. You have two-factor authentication or similar technologies enabled, because that helps. Access control, as mentioned, is a topic. There's been quite a few fines already for a lack of encryption. Definitely a hot topic. If you issue mobile phones or smartphones or other laptops to your staff, make sure that you can remotely wipe those, because laptops get lost, get stolen, taken from a car, left on a train, etc. And even if you would have some paper documents, make sure that your cabinets can be locked. It's a simple thing, but of course important in terms of security. So nearly there. Leaves us with GDPR rights. So prior to GDPR, it wasn't really too clear what your rights were around your own personal data, and if there were any. And now this has changed. So GDPR very, very explicitly says, right, you have rights over your own personal data. One is the right for information. So you need to be informed. So we already discussed transparency, a privacy policy. So as a individual, you should be informed. And if the privacy policy you see online is not clear, you should be able to contact that firm and ask for clarifications. And they should respond. If they don't, you can go and lodge a complaint with your national supervisor, and they will act on those. Yeah. So as a firm, if you get requests, also always make sure you respond within promptly. On our GDPR-wise website, there's templates for all of those actions, and also mentioning of the timelines. So rights for information.
And regarding this, I also have a very interesting case. So, for instance, there are multiple solutions where you can book appointments, but what if you embed it on your website? Everyone can just enter any email and book a call. And then this email can get spammed by email like follow-ups or reminders. So in theory, if you're looking for a scheduling app, even this has to be with has to have a double opt-in where you confirm your email address. And this is the consent that Patrick was mentioning, where you consent to receive those reminders and emails. But it can be really tricky. So you have to think really deep into this whole situation. Where are you fetching data and how are you processing it? Even though it might seem trivial, like a person is just entering the email, you have to think about it that it could be someone else just using this email and it's not the person's email. So you have to verify if it's really this person. That's what I'm saying, and it can be quite tricky in some circumstances.
Yeah, you're right. Right. So back to the rights: right of information, right of access, as in not necessarily the customer giving the customer access to your business systems, but the customer can request, hey, what data do you have on me? So you can go to, for instance, your mobile phone operator and say, hey, what data you have on me? And they are obliged to provide all of that information. You have the right to rectify if something is wrong. You have the right to delete and erasure. So of course, sometimes not all the data can be deleted. You might have invoices that, of course, companies will need to keep 8, 10, 12 years, depending on jurisdictions. But you can definitely request to delete, and you can object. So whatever the company was using, kind of legal basis number 4, you can say, right, that's fine that you believe you have a legitimate interest, but I object to that element. I just want to the parts of the service that are linked to, for instance, the contractual legal basis.
And I believe that you can also get compensation, right? If your data has been used illegally, or if there has been like a data breach. Because I know, for instance, in Germany, there are multiple cases against Facebook, Deezer, and tools like this, where there are like thousands of people, going into court for exactly this.
Yes, you can definitely raise a formal complaint with the local authority, and they might impose fines, which could even include compensation to the affected parties.
Yeah. So you as a company, might be in the situation to pay this compensation for the individuals.
Yes, yeah.
Breach the data.
Is a serious event. It might not, of course, no one's does it on purpose, but that's why you want to take this thing seriously, both on the security side and, for instance, data minimization. If you don't have the data in the first place, you can't be breached. So on the rights actions here, there are rights, and so you must act and facilitate those rights. So don't be surprised if all of a sudden someone wants to say, request the data to be deleted, and then say, oh my God, I have no idea how to do this. Yeah, I mean, your compliance is in making sure that you can act on those rights. Make sure that in your privacy policy, you refer to those rights. This means fines as well. Again, users need to be informed. Of course, you want to make it easy on yourself. If you have a website or software, and that can be automated, for instance, requests to correct or delete, then make it easy. Respond promptly. Most of these requests give you 30 days and no more. Okay, so that's it really. Rules about personal data. It isn't more complicated than that. GDPR doesn't really prohibit much. It's more about minimization of bringing transparency and doing the right thing when it comes to security and rights. So if we want to just get a couple of examples going here, imagine you have a software package, has lots of fields to manage your customer data, but I only use a few. So that's not a problem as long as the software is properly secured. Well, no, there's more than security. Security was one element just. Some think, well, if it's not in the cloud, then GDPR doesn't apply. Well, that's of course not true. Some believe it's only about consent and having permission. Of course, we've seen that's not true. There's only one element. Is if you don't minimize the data you capture, you are at risk. A risk in terms of exposing it, risk in terms of compliance. So by all means, minimize. That's a core aspect of compliance here. Case number 2, my website builder has built me the website and gave me a privacy policy, and actually there's a cookie pop-up. So I have a privacy policy and go, surely I am compliant. Yes, you are compliant if you don't sell anything online. No, that's definitely false. Doesn't really matter if you sell anything, just profit or non-profit. If your website or not, that doesn't matter. If you process for you personal data, it's actually in scope. 2, if your privacy policy is very general, doesn't say anything too specific, you're okay. No, we've seen it needs to be very specific and informative. Cookie pop-up is the most important thing. No, that's only one aspect. For the cookie is a personal data element because it links back to you as an individual. So it's only for that one element, and then the consent comes in there. And so, of course, you understood by now, it requires reflection and documentation and something and actions to be taken. You can't just have a copy and paste document from your website.
I have a question regarding the case 2. So what if I have a website and I don't have any cookies? Do I need a privacy policy just for the IP that is sent to the server?
Your privacy policy should cover any processing you do within your company. The privacy policy doesn't only have to in-scope the website. So your company is more than the website. So you offer services, you follow that, you will gather data, maybe not through the website. You'll do billing, you'll have correspondence via email with customers, you might have certain tools. So 2 different things. The website is just one aspect, one process, one business objective. So you want to be online, findable, searchable, and that's just one aspect of it.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. And for case 1, I also have something to mention. So for instance, even if you are building a software, I mean, in the beginning, it might be, just an idea to use all the data you can get. But if you really think about what data you really need, you can also minimize your database structure and therefore get more efficient in terms of database functions and database retrieval costs. So this will also save you a lot of time later on. And that's why I think in general, GDPR is way more than just data security, but also data performance or even app performance, if you think about it from this point of view.
Absolutely, yes. So for any of the audience that's in SaaS, as developing SaaS applications or other applications, yes, absolutely. That's a benefit also of following these kind of principles, data minimization. Case number 3. Hey, I'm a physiotherapist. I run my practice and the entirety of it on my laptop. So I don't think I should do anything. Indeed, if you don't have a website, there's no need for a privacy policy. Hey, we already discussed it. Privacy policy covers and should cover all of your business processing of personal data, not just the website. So if you have things on your laptop, that is also in scope, and you should inform your customers of all of the workings that deal with personal data. If you don't have a website, don't do mailings, you don't do cloud, you don't have to do anything. No, we've already discussed it. Medical data in this case is that one special category, part of that special category. So there's very specific rules around it. And so definitely you will need to give GDPR a serious look and have a privacy policy and go through the other aspects as well. Last one here. Oh no, there's one more after this. Cookie cookie pop-ups. That's how annoying they are very annoying. I agree. They're very annoying. Why are they necessary? Well, websites are actually downloading a file to your PC. And they store lots of information about you and track your behavior, and that's personal data. And so if it's personal data, then it shouldn't really happen without you knowing or your consent. So you need to be informed and you need to have consent. These cookies can be far reaching, and mind you, those maybe building websites or building software, you can create well-performing websites without cookies. There's an alternative technologies that are far less privacy invasive, and as a result, better for everyone involved. And you can see that the Googles of this world are also clawing back on the very pervasive tracking that they do. Google Consent V2, I'm sure you've heard of it if you build websites, is an example of that. Last one then here. I don't sell through my websites, and therefore I don't need a privacy or don't fall under GDPR. No, we have already said so. It's irrespective of profit aspects. If you do not collect personal data, you're okay with GDPR. No, it might not be on the website that you collect personal data, although I doubt it. You will have, if you have a web server, you will record an IP address, most likely. So that's not correct. If you're not selling online, you only need a cookie pop-up. That's not correct. Of course, by now you understand you have the obligation to provide in a clear manner the information of all of the processing you do around personal data, offline, online, and that all needs to be in scope. So that's the end of the theory. And if you already have a privacy policy that either you created or you kind of someone created for you, or you use the tool, feel free. We have an online policy checker free of charge, and it will go through a number of elements and give you an idea of how good it is. So if there are no gaps, by all means, stay with that. If there are any gaps, you can use our knowledge base to close those gaps, or actually use our app to do so. And if you wanted to stay around for another 10 minutes or so, I can show you how very quickly you can build up, using our GDPR-wise SaaS software, to build up your GDPR dossier and generate all of the documentation you need. We're also giving you a discount code if you're interested. So if I would quickly show you how that would work, if I would say, right, I am registering a new company, that could be you. You have to go to a little setup. Here, we want to know in which country you are, because although GDPR is uniform across Europe, certain aspects of data like security cameras and these are country specific. But that takes us a bit
just
too far.
a quick question, Pat. Can I use your privacy policy checker for a German privacy policy?
Yes. Yes, you can.
Cool.
That's not part of the app. That's just available free on the website.
That's really cool. Yeah.
We have the setup wizard. We, of course, need to know your company name, your registration number, not because we need to know, but in the legal documentation, these items need to feature. But the most important question for you is, in which industry do you operate? Because we have created over 30 dossiers already per sector. And so if you would be, you can search here as well. If you say, right, I'm a hotel, or the most common ones are up here. If I say digital services, I think quite a few of you guys might be SaaS companies. So if I select the industry, then immediately we're giving you that. Remember, you had to have a listing of all the business processes and purposes of where you process or where you use personal data. Well, that's here. We've already per sector created those. So each of those cards is that. So if you're in digital, you probably will have a website, and you know what? We've put everything ready. All you need to do here is have a quick read, a review, and say, hey, my website uses these data elements for sure. Most will have an IP address that the server will log, will have essential cookies, and then say, hey, my website has other things. I actually have some third-party cookies, might have some marketing cookies. I actually have a contact form, and I use that an email address and a customer name. So these things, you need to, we've suggested some, there's others for you to consider. There's a long list for you to choose from, and you can create your own data items. Yeah? And so that's really the work that we want you to do, so that you can completely align your way of working with kind of the default, the 80% that we have already set up for you. And so these cards are the things that we know you're most likely already doing. There's some other things to consider. Hey, do you have a security camera? Do you have a newsletter? If you imagine you have a newsletter, you say, hey, I'm going to add that to my dossier. That's processing I do. And by the way, I do capture the consent here, and I have a read receipt. So you again, align with the way you work. Yeah? And then you go through the wizard to just finalize your account. There's always a free trial, 90 days. And then we have a yearly subscription of $295. But of course, you have the promo code here from Meetergo. If I would, and then you're going to complete it with setting up the account, the emails being confirmed. If I would go back to an account I've created previously, you will see that will take you to what we've just done. And so we're not just doing the listing of business activities with personal data in one dossier just for customer. No, you have the opportunity to do the same if you have staff for your staff. So for example, you probably hire staff, and in that hiring of staff, you use data elements, a hub. And so with a few clicks, you can easily build up your dossier. And there's another element here with third parties. Any tools you use. So you use social media. You know what? That means that LinkedIn, in this example, is a third party. You have a Google Analytics. You know what? That's a third party. So these are very, very similar to the other cards I've shown you, but they have an element of who is the third party that is involved. So in the example of video conferencing software, you say, right, these are the things that we use, maybe email address as well. And imagine that the third party being Meetergo. Say, right, Meetergo is already set up. The data sharing agreement, they have that, you can download that, hub. And so your third party dossier now nicely reflects, and you can inform your customers, say, hey, we have video conferencing software. By the way, these are the data elements that are processed. And by the way, the third party is Meetergo. You can hide the name of the third party in your privacy policy as well. And so that gives us, if you have those dossiers, that gives us the opportunity to generate the documents automatically, because we have all the information that we need. Every single aspect of GDPR is covered. You can go and generate. If you need to make changes, you can make changes in your dossier, and then the tool will trigger you to generate again. You can download it, you can preview it. It will give you some guidance in the preview that will not be in the final download, but you can see how this document is being very, very specific about the things that you are doing. And this is not just generic copy and pasting. And then lastly, what I wanted to show you, so very quickly, you can build up your dossier because most of the setup is done by us, 80/20. But then we also have an action dashboard and a scoring. So you want to very quickly get in your initial efforts out of the foundation mode. And so we'll give you, in this case, this sector, it all depends on your dossier. It is dynamic, but it says, hey, first action, of course, now you've done your dossiers, generate your privacy policy, and put that on your website. Oh, am I? I thought I was in the. I'm on the free account here. I'm very sorry. I can't action those here. My demo is still on the free account. But if you weren't on the free account, then you could say, right, this is in motion. I'm assigning this to Bob if you have more than one user on the account, or this is completed, and then your compliance score will go up. Yeah. Some of these actions are recurring. So a basic security training for your staff, you know what, we feel that should be a yearly action. So the tool will trigger you to come back and say, right, you need to look at these elements again. And so foundation, that we feel will give you a good overall defensible position. but you see you can do more. There's some advanced elements. For instance, half yearly look at certain password rules, consider cybersecurity insurance. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you can see there's advanced elements and even robust elements where you would move towards maybe an ISO certification. So that will be important when, as mentioned, if you would contract with larger entities, most of them will do a security review or a privacy review. But that's it in essence. So very quickly, build up your dossier, generate your documents, go through your actions, and then keep it going. This does not need to be all a day one effort. By all means, get going. That will take a few weeks to go through your dossier, pick up some actions. That might take a quarter or two. It doesn't really matter. But the fact that you're taking it seriously and you're there to improve as you go.
I mean, this is really awesome, Pat. I have to say, I never seen this platform in that much detail, I have to say, and I think it's even better than I thought. So basically, for 245 euros a year with this discount, you get everything you need to know about GDPR compliance and inside actionable steps. I have to say this is really golden, really, really good. And as Pat mentioned, if you implement this, you can also talk to enterprise clients and everything will be so much easier. You will be so much more professional. And basically, the only thing you need to do is just log in into this dashboard and follow the tasks and that's it. So I don't think it can get any easier. I mean, okay, maybe you just pay for a consultancy that does it, but obviously this will be way more expensive. So yeah, I really love this approach, and I think this is really, really cool, especially that you have this data sharing agreements part. This is also really cool because I think you didn't show this, or I'm not sure, but yeah, this one. So this is really, really cool because right now at Meet Ergo, we have so many data sharing agreements which are inside the Google Doc, and some are there, some are somewhere else. We have to look for them, and we don't even know like how how long they are valid and stuff like this. So having all of this inside one app, one dashboard is really awesome. I love this approach.
Cool. That's good to hear, Dominic. Yes, and we call our subscription, our the 295 without the discount subscription, we call it peace of mind, because that's what we get as feedback from our customers. GDPR, what is it? What can we do? What should we not do? We have a very pragmatic approach. There's lots of setup already done. It's the 80-20 rule, and with the dashboard, we keep the actions manageable and pragmatic, and just people go through it, and there's peace of mind, and that's exactly what you want. It's an important compliance topic. And so, hey, happy days after that.
Awesome. Sounds really good. So if there are no more questions in the chat, I would call this webinar a day. And yeah, thanks, Pat, for joining. This whole webinar will be available on YouTube as well. So yeah, if you miss anything, you can just rewatch it and rewind. So yeah, everything will be available to you. But you have to imagine that maybe if you are watching this in 5 years, some stuff could have changed. So that's even more important to use GDPR wise, so to be up to date and yeah, don't miss out on any regulations. Yeah, cool thing. Pat, thanks for joining this webinar. It was really awesome for having you here. And yeah, guys,
Thank you.
have a great day.
Thank you for inviting us. Speak later.
And see you.